I'm going to start off by just welcoming you all and thanking you all for joining us today. Today's webinar is for everyone, for anyone considering applying specifically for a professional development grant through the Park and Trail Partnership Grants Program. There will be two general informational webinars offered for those wishing to apply for the other three categories, but and those webinars, those will occur on June 6th at 2 p.m. and June 25th at 11 a.m. So if you're looking to do any of the, possibly apply for any of the other three, then those dates are better for you. And I do see somebody does chat. Yay, thank you, Sydney. Woohoo! Sydney to the rescue. All right, so yes, in terms of a little housekeeping, let me just advance to the next slide here. Just general housekeeping, we have you all muted, and you can ask questions about the material using the Q&A feature, and we will address those questions at intervals throughout the webinar. If you'd like to introduce yourself to everybody, or if you are having any technical issues or just need to communicate to us directly, you can use the chat feature for that function. And a recording of this webinar, it will be available on our website with a link to the recordings that we will email to you afterwards. All right, so who is on this call? It is, I am Jonathan Duda. I am the grants manager at Parks and Trails New York. And co-hosting along with me is Sydney Robinson. She is this year's Arthur V. Savage intern. And thank you for being here, Sydney. And it's also too very helpful for you all, so that it kind of breaks up so that you're not listening to my voice the entire time. All right. Today's webinar is going to cover what you see right here on this list. There are a few reasons for hosting a webinar just on these professional development grants, because these are special staffing grants, so that we want to be sure that applicants understand the commitment and can sustain the permanent staff position after the grant period ends. Oops. Okay. All right, so professional development grants, they're slightly different from the other three categories of our grants that we offer through the Park and Trail Partnership Grants Program. The professional development grant, it's a 2-year grant cycle, while the other grant categories are only 1 year. The professional development grants, they require significant commitment from organizations. It's a 20% match, all in cash, from the organization. While the other grants require a 10% match, those also, you can kind of dabble with those a little bit, having half of which can be in kind. These must be all cash. Professional development applicants start by submitting an LOI, or a letter of intent to apply, by filling out the form on the grant portal. So a little bit about our organization. For those of you who don't know us, Parks and Trails New York is the leading statewide nonprofit organization working since 1985 to expand, protect, and promote our network of parks, trails, and open spaces throughout the state. We work to strengthen friends groups, which has remained a central part of our organization over the past 30 years. So here's a quick little history of the Park and Trail Partnership Grants. It is a competitive matching grants program. Thus, your application is not assured to be awarded due to the limited funds available. It is funded through the New York State Environmental Protection Fund. This year, we are heading into the 10th round. The state budget this year, once again, allocated $2 million to the program, which is wonderful, because back in 2015, we started at 500,000 and it was doubled to $1 million. And since that launch in 2015, we have awarded 222 projects to 90 nonprofit organizations throughout New York State. We're very proud of that. And we work together with New York State Parks on the administration and the evaluation of the grant. This year is the first round that we're operating on a new yearly schedule, which we'll delve into a little bit later in this webinar. So the underlying goal of these grants, and particularly the professional development grant, is to support and enhance our state parks, our trails, our state historic sites, and public lands. We do that through this program by strengthening the organizations that support these special places, which are you, the Friends groups. Whatever position you are looking to fill or whatever project you are considering, it should directly relate back to one or more of these goals that you see here. So in terms of eligibility, the very first thing that you should do in this process is to ask yourself, well, is my group eligible to apply? So for starters, does your organization's mission reflect the stewardship of a park, trail, historic site, or public land under the jurisdiction of either OPRHP, New York State Parks, or the Department of Environmental Conservation? Some other requirements include that it must be a not-for-profit organization incorporated in New York State, must be classified as a tax-exempt 501c3 organization by the IRS, or you can be operating under the fiscal sponsorship of a 501c3 organization. You must have an MOA, a memorandum of agreement with New York State Parks, or an MOU, or a volunteer service agreement, or a use and occupancy agreement with the DEC at the time the grant is awarded. So, yeah, unfortunately, at this time, municipalities or friends groups of non-state affiliated parks, historic sites, or public lands are not eligible for these park and trail partnership grants. So just going to touch a little bit on the few other categories of the grant program. In addition to professional development grants, there are 3 other types available through the program. There is a stewardship and public access capacity grant, which assists with the more tangible, on-the-ground enhancements to the resource, while also enhancing an organization's capacity and visibility. There's also a capacity and organizational effectiveness grant, which are for types of projects that you traditionally think of when you think of capacity building: strategic plans, board staff training, communications, etc. And then the last one is our step-up grants, which are to assist organizations, very small budding organizations, with achieving 501c3 status. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 upcoming webinars on June 6th and June 25th for the other grant categories. And you can sign up for those on the website, and which will be flashing in front of you in just a moment. But for right now, what I'll do is I'll turn it over to Sydney, and she'll go a little bit more into the professional development grants themselves.
Thank you, John. So just to reiterate, we're doing the professional development grants webinar, and the goal for the professional development grant is to support the hiring of staff in order to advance your organizations to a higher and more sustainable level of professionalism, fiscal and administrative stability, in addition to community outreach that hopefully in the future will be able to sustain themselves on their own. So if your organization is interested in hiring temporary contractors, interns, or seasonal staff to support your organization's work, that request would fall under the Capacity and Organizational Effectiveness Grant or the Stewardship and Public Access grant as well. But for the professional development grants, this grant is for hiring permanent staff, either first staff hire, which references like hiring the organization's first permanent employee, part-time or full-time; additional staff hiring, so additional employment for permanent staff to fill in a critical administration, outreach, or development need, or any key other function, also both part-time and full-time; and then either an upgrade to full-time status, so increasing a part-time executive director or other key staff positions to a full-time role. So to kind of bundle it up, the grants are up to $150,000 over a period of 2 years, and they do require 20% cash match. So the application timeline. The professional development grant is unlike the other grant categories. They do require a letter of intent or LOR as referenced by John earlier in the webinar. To apply first, the LOIs are submitted by filling out and submitting the LOI form in the grant portal. And those are going to be due on June 24th. Our team will review the submitted LOIs and will notify the organizations by the following week whether they have been invited to submit a full application for the grant. And those full applications will be due August 28th. This is another area that is unique to the professional development grant. Applicants will be asked to participate in a phone interview with PTNY staff. And these calls are really helpful to us to gain a better understanding of your organization, its preparedness for meeting the grant requirements, and just for sustaining a new and expected staff position as a whole. And the decisions are going to be expected to be announced on January in 2025. 50% of the grant is dispersed at the contract signing in late January, and then the remainder of the funds will be dispersed after the submission of the satisfactory of the 1-year interim report the following January. So grant match examples. The professional development grant requires a 20% match from the Friends group, and the match is a percentage of the total project budget, not the total grant request. The grant request plus your match must equal the total project budget as a whole. There are 2 ways to calculate your project budget in match. First, you will start with your total project cost. If you do know the cost of your total project for the 2 years is $100,000, for example, you would apply a grant match of $80,000, and your organization will need to provide a match of $20,000, all of which have to be cash, as mentioned earlier. Another way is to start with the maximum amount match of your organization is capable. If your organization expects to raise no more than $8,000 in matching funds, then you should not apply for more than $32,000 in grant funds, for example. So an easy way to do that is to multiply the amount you expect to raise by 5 to come up with the total grant you may request. And this would give you the total project budget of, for example, in this calculation, $40,000. There is a handy match tool on our website to help you with these figures, so you can reference back to the website for that. The organizational match. Please keep in mind that the match is a percentage of the entire project budget, not the percentage of the amount that you'll be requesting from the grant. We request that you provide proof of the availability of these funds, whether it's a bank statement or a letter from your board president, within 30 days of the announcement of this award. And if operating funds or reserve funds are expected to be used as a cash match, a board-approved statement indicating that these specific funds are available will be dedicated for the required match is required. And matching funds can be from individuals such as members, donors, current board members, foundations, corporations, federal or local grants. However, matching funds cannot be state grants or state funds. So just to pause, in the chat, you can put in or in the Q&A any questions that you have just from the information that we've provided so far. I'll check the chat just in case.
Yeah. Thank you, Sydney. And we'll pause here, and then Sydney will continue about the application process in a bit. But yes, if you do have questions now, we do request the Q&A function. That way we can save all of the questions that are asked and share them out with those who were unable to attend. Hopefully no questions means that we're doing a really good job here. And I also too want to just acknowledge the presentation as our first webinar, transitioning from PowerPoint to Canva. So hopefully everything is smooth, and for years we were using PowerPoint. This is new, so if there are any hiccups, that's our excuse. I do see one question here from Courtney Carroll that, and this is a very common question that's asked: can you apply for more than one grant in a different category? A couple of different grants, 2 different categories, and Yes, yep, you most certainly can. I will not discourage you from doing so. I will be totally honest. So we have yet to fund more than one project for an organization, mainly due to what we had mentioned earlier. This is a very competitive grants program. But we never know what the competition is until all those applications are submitted at the end of the round. So what I like to tell organizations is if you have the capacity now and the time, the staff or volunteer staff to be able to apply for two, and should one get denied, there's nothing wrong with that. Hold on to that application for the next round. And what you can do is really resubmit, reapply using that same thing. And then you'll hear from me too that throughout the webinar that really do encourage you to contact me to solicit any advice about the project. So if your project was denied, feel free to give a call. I'll set up a time to go through to what we can do to make it stronger for the next round. And so that's something to consider. So yeah, if you apply for two, one gets denied, then yep, just reapply. You can just kind of copy and paste a lot of that info and maybe enhance it a little bit for the next round.
We do have a question in the chat from Pauline. It says 50% of the funds are not awarded until the end of the year. How can you pay for the staff if the match is 20%?
So yes, well, this is all where it comes to comes to the budgeting. So at the end of those 2 years, that 20%. So essentially, yeah, each year, the organization would essentially have to match 10% each year. So if you go to that match calculator, you can kind of divide it into two there. 50% of the funds are awarded at the start, right when you submit your grant agreement. So 50% are awarded then. The next 50% of the funds are not awarded until that 1 year. And we'll go into this again. We'll give you a little bit of a visual timeline at the end of the webinar to show you. So that second half, that second 50% of the funds are awarded 1 year afterwards. So that all comes down to the budgeting, to do a monthly timeline too of what the salary and benefits of the staff member. And that way you can figure out, number one, just what you can pay them with what the organization is capable of matching. So there is, yeah, Sydney had gone over in the match calculator there. You can kind of go backwards, say, well, we don't know what to pay, but our organization has X amount in that we can contribute toward, or expecting a foundation grant or something of that sort. So you can kind of work backwards to figure that out.
There doesn't look to be any more questions.
All right, thank you. Okay, so what we'll do, and again, yeah, you can, if a question does pop up in your head while we're talking, just plop it right into that Q&A and it will be there when we get to our next pause spot. So what I'll do is continue along and Sydney will tell you about the application process.
So the application process, step one is first just accessing the grant system itself. You can access the grant application by logging into the grant portal, and a link is available at ptnyfriends.org/grants, as you can see on the right side of your screen. We do suggest bookmarking the link to the grant portal itself just for easy access going forward. For those of you who are used to accessing it on our main website, that link will also still be active as well. Application process, the apply page. There are a lot of instructions and video tutorials on how to use the grant system as a whole. You can find these on the apply page, which is accessible from the ptnyfriends.org/grants page as referenced in the other slide, by selecting the grants and then Park and Trail Partnership grants in the menu items. And then you can choose apply from the drop-down menu, which you'll notice on your screen currently. And then there's a link to the grant portal on those drop downs for your convenience if you should need to access it from any other pages as well. And if this is your first time applying, we suggest spending some time looking over the grant portal information on the apply page before starting the login process, just so you can get familiar what you're able to utilize. Grant portal register and login. If you have applied before, input the login email and password, email address and password. There is a forgot your password option should you need to create a new one if you forgot it. If it is your first time applying, you will need to click and create a new account. And then you'll enter your organization's information. And the information required here includes your organization name, your employee identification number, your organization's email, and the mailing address. You will fill it out on the first. You will fill it out on the first for the organization, then for you individually, and then for the executive director, unless you are the executive officer, in which your case, your information will be automatically included as that. No, if you're using official agent, you would need their EIN. The dashboard. The dashboard is your home page. If you apply before, all former application will be available on this dashboard. It also lists your organization and your executive director's information. So then you would next select apply to begin the process. Selecting professional development grant category. On the application page, click the apply button next to the professional development category and take note of the send to Grant Hub. You do not need to have Grant Hub in order to apply for this grant. Clicking apply will open up the letter of inquiry form since that is the current items due for the PD grants. The full application will not be available until after invitations to apply have been sent, but we will go through a sneak peek of the full application later in this webinar. Completing the LOI. You will not see the full application at this point, just the LOI application form. You can save the LOI form and come back to it as many times as needed. We do recommend printing out a list of questions to start. And working on the application, there will be an application packet button that will print a PDF of the questions and answers that you have already entered into the system for your records. So another stop for questions if you have any. I'll check the Q&A and feel free to send some questions in there.
Or if nobody has questions, just plop in the chat what state park, guess the state park in the photo. It's usually what we like to try to do for some of these pictures. But again, yes, if you think of a question while we're running through everything, just put it right into the Q&A, which it looks like somebody just did. Can you okay, we're asked, can you elaborate upon what is required in the MOA? So an MOA, a memorandum of agreement, is an official document, an official agreement that an organization acquires in partnership with another organization or with the state agency. So in the case of the MOA, or in the case of the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, the MOA is acquired through the Parks Office. It's best to first contact your regional office to determine the best way to go about doing so. And they'll get you going from there. I will give a heads up. I know in the past several months, there was a backlog in processing the agreement. And so if you do not currently hold one, start ASAP. And what I would recommend is start your application too while that's going on. If OPRHP or the DEC for that matter too, if they're in agreement that yes, we'll go forward with this agreement, all you need to do for the application, just so that you can get it submitted and everything on time, is to provide a letter from the state agencies letting us know that the agreement process is underway. that will at least hold the place for them until the agreement is drawn up and complete. We do, let me think, I don't want to quote this, but I believe there might be a sample MOA on our website. If it's not there, you can email me, and I know that we did have like a kind of a template, just a very basic general one, just so that you kind of have an awareness of what's in there. We also do have there's our Friends Gateway, which is an online forum, which you can go on there and request. If there is anyone who does have a basic one that they wish to share. But we do have one that's not site specific, one that does just kind of have the general basic info in it. Okay, moving along. I'm going to discuss that, now that we've shown you how to access the application, we will review the letter of intent application process and those questions. So these are the 4 general sections of the LOI application that we'll be going over. First, what I've mentioned earlier is eligibility. Here, you'll be asked to confirm that you meet the eligibility criteria that we already overviewed. If your MOA has expired or will expire soon, you'll need to provide a letter from the park or site manager or the regional director if the group manages the site, just stating that a new MOA is in progress and is expected to be signed. As I was just speaking earlier, if you've never had an MOA with OPRHP or DEC, that does not preclude you from applying. You would just need a letter from them saying that one is in progress. So regarding general request information, this is just pretty basic stuff here. You should be able to describe the title of the position, the amount that you are requesting, and keep in mind that this is for 2 years. You're not requesting just for the annual salary, but it is for 2 years of that salary, plus benefits, etc. And then also the basic information about the position. Now, in the narrative, be sure to really thoroughly read all of the questions. Examples of some of the questions include themes such as community connections, organizational commitment, what results you expect, and how you plan to evaluate those results. Please limit your answers to 2 to 3 paragraphs. There are actually character limits in each of the fields on the application, but be specific, be very specific about outcomes and expectations. And especially important in this narrative section, explain the plan to sustain the position beyond the 2-year period and the security and source of those funds. That is something that our reviewers do really look at closely is, well, this is wonderful, we can fund this for 2 years, but how do they plan to keep this position going after the funding runs out? Some of the supporting documents that we'll be requesting include an operating budget for your organization, your most recent financial statements, which we expect 2 documents here, an income statement and a balance sheet. If these are documents that your organization does not currently have, there are templates available on our website, and we'd also be happy to talk to you a little bit more about it. If you are acting under a fiscal sponsor, applicants must also include the financial statement for the fiscal sponsor from the last fiscal year. Other documents that we request on the application include the most recent annual report, if that's available. Also an existing strategic plan or other long-term organizational plan. Since we would be unlikely to grant a professional development grant to an organization that did not have a plan, we felt we should make it clear and make it a requirement that you do have a strategic plan, or at least, yeah, some kind of more just long-term plan. So whether it is a first staff person or a new staff person, the decision to hire a permanent position is one that should have been really thought through, and one that the board and the organization should really agree that this is an important step to take. So we'd expect to see that in the grant request is keeping up with the organization's vision and plans. Since organizations can't see the full application unless they're invited to apply, we did want to provide a little summary to help you think ahead. Again, once you've submitted your LOI, it will be reviewed and evaluated by us. If you do have a strong LOI, you will be invited to submit a full professional development application. Like the LOI, the full application is broken up into 4 sections. Some of these questions are repeated from the LOI, so unless something has changed, you will already have answered these in the LOI. But you'll be asked to provide standard info on your organization that you should have readily available. One narrative question asks how to describe your organization's history and experience. This is your opportunity to tell us where your organization has been, where you are now, and where you're going. So in general, just make sure you read each question thoroughly and answer all parts of the question. And please limit your responses to no more than 3 paragraphs. In terms of the required attachments in this section, we want to quickly review the budget and the related documentation. So to start here for the project budget, we're looking for a detailed itemized budget for your proposal that includes both the income and expenses. This helps show us that you've really thought about what is needed to undertake the new or expanded staff position and how you're going to secure the resources to do it. So this must also include information on expected sources of the organization's match, the status of these funds, whether they're pledged in hand or yet to be raised. We really encourage organizations to use this as an opportunity to leverage other sources of funding, but if you intend to use operating funds or reserve funds as part or all of your cash match, you'll need to submit to us as part of the application a board-approved statement indicating that these specific funds are available and that they'll be dedicated for the required match. And so remember, half of the total match must be in hand before we disperse that first half of the grant award. So there are templates available on the resources section of our website. This is just an example of something that you can use, and you can see here that the requested amount in the red box, the 72,000, spread out over the 2 years, and how they'll be meeting their required match. The total income, which is that green box, needs to equal the total expenses. And let's see, oh yeah, make sure that your match is at least 20% of the total project budget and not of your ask. That's also confusing too in the other categories that we have. The match should be for the total project budget, not of the ask. And you should have already figured most of this out as part of the LOI process and coming up with your total project budget, match amount, and request amount, etc. So some additional supporting documents that are requested include things such as a current list of either staff and or board of directors, letters of support from OPRHP or DEC staff. We do really like to have digital photos, and so for promotional purposes, so please provide high quality, preferably with people and surrounding area. And you can email it to us as attachments, or better yet, a link to a shared folder is actually preferable. Other helpful materials, such as things your organizations have, such as a newsletter, other publications, press clippings, etc. Your most recent financial report to the New York State Charities Bureau, whether it's a CHAR 500 or CHAR 410, and then additional letters of support from the community, local legislators, partners that you are affiliated with your organization. These should all be mailed or emailed directly to Parks and Trails New York from the supporter. As for the Charities Bureau, organizations in New York State are required to register with the New York State Attorney General's Charities Bureau and fill out an annual report. All applicants must submit their most recently filed report, which is the Chart 500. But newly registered applicants who have yet to submit an annual report can just attach a copy of your registration form, the Chart 410. If you have been remiss in registering or filing, you can explain that in the application. So don't let that stop you from applying. But you have been given a heads up, so just keep that in mind. But we will accept a description of that from you. And I'll pause right there as we're heading into the final stretch here to see if there are any other questions. I see, let's see, Pauline had asked, can we collaborate with another friends group to share the staff? Yes. That is something, yeah, you can certainly contact me about that. I know we do provide shared consultant services. But yeah, that give me a call about that, and that is something to discuss because that would be depending on the other organization, their relation with the state agency, et cetera. So yeah, that would be a good application, a good challenge for us to determine. So it could be challenging. There might be some gray areas if you're sharing staff. So it would certainly have to be well thought out, well planned, budget, et cetera, on behalf of both organizations. So yeah, that's something you can certainly contact us about. Okay, if we will pause at the end we have just a few more slides here that Sydney will be going over, and we'll allow some time at the end there as well to ask any final questions that you may have. So Sydney will begin with some application tips. Up, you're unmuted.
And so yes, we're going into application tips. First, I would suggest is just start gathering information now. Remember, this is the busy season for most of you, so plan accordingly ahead. Also, be sure that your park manager or agency staff are aware of the project. A letter of support for them is required for the application, so don't catch them off guard at the last moment. We do request that you obtain the letter from them and upload it to your application at least 30 days prior to the application deadline. And download the application form ahead of time to familiarize yourself with the questions and the required documentation. Before starting the narrative, become familiar with the evaluation criteria our reviewers use. This list is available on the resource section on the website. Be aware of questions that may have multiple parts and be sure to address them in your narrative. Avoid waiting until the last moment. A rush answer to a question can often be very apparent during the evaluation process. And then for file uploads, the system only allows 1 to 2 MB limit per question. And then combine all docs into one file, either using Adobe or other software that's readily available to you or that you just use more. And if you have trouble combining documents, or if your documents exceed the limit, please feel free to call us so we can try to help you with that. Also, emailing supplemental materials. You can email photos, letter of support, etc. to grants@ptny.org. Be sure to be specific in any time you send supplemental materials so that we know who they're coming from for our organizational purposes. Also, don't forget to click the submit application button at the bottom of the form. Otherwise, you'll think that you simply abandoned the application itself. And additional resources can be found on the website, including a frequently asked questions page for your benefit. Templates and tools. These can be found on the resources for applicants page on our website, such as Excel sheets to use for your project budget, the match calculator tool as we referenced earlier, sample organizational operating budget, sample income statement, sample balance sheet, volunteer time tracking tools, and then payroll costs, budgeting for mandatory benefits, organizational self-assessment, and visioning tools. And as lastly, we mentioned the sample MOU with the official agent for organizations who lack the 501c3 status, a sample work plan, and just sample job description online for your application. And as mentioned before, a list of the evaluation criteria for our reviewers use to make their decisions are available. So next steps after this webinar. Make sure that you are eligible and check on the status of your organization's agreement with state parks. And also start identifying and securing matching funds. As we highlighted earlier, state funds are not acceptable. And ask us, PTNY, any questions that you may have for clarity, information, just to make sure you're on the right page and you're doing it correctly, and so you don't have any hesitancy. Also, submit the letter of intent form in the grant portal by June 24th. We'll review and contact you the following week whether or not it has been accepted. And if so, you'll have until Wednesday, August 28th to submit your final grant application. So the timeline. Here is the 2-year timeline at a glance. Note that the final report for the position is due January of 2027. So plan the timeline in your application accordingly. And lastly, the interim report. This is due January 2025. It consists of only 5 questions, but it does request documentation of the remaining matching funds. This in the partnership roadmap, this is just a few questions to discuss with your board and park manager, asking you to consider your organization's strategic direction, your priorities, and just overall how they align with the site as a whole. So we're going to transition into some questions, and I did see one pop up. Is there an example of the organizational plan document on the website?
An organizational plan document on the website. I don't believe that there is on there. Yeah, check, it is the resources page. There's so much on there. And so much, a lot of it is from the beginning back in 2015. I don't think there is, but yeah, Jacqueline, if there is something that you are seeking, there may be, we maybe have an example of it that we just haven't shared. So feel free, yeah, just email me at grants@ptny.org if you can't find it on there.
There's some questions in the chat. It says, will you discuss payroll costs?
Payroll costs, in this webinar, we don't go too much into that. In terms of payroll, the budget templates that we have on there does have some of that information in it in terms of the various benefits, et cetera. But every organization is different. And so yeah, we just don't go too much into it. But there certainly are other organizations, if you're really struggling to try to come up with a proper budget, come up with proper figures. Again, I mentioned our online forum there on the gateway that you can ask that question that goes out to dozens and dozens of friends groups, many of whom are likely the same size as yours, maybe similar, and they might have a similar position in there that they might be willing to share some of the info with you.
And are there examples of successful applicants on the website itself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Here I am reading the queue. Say that again, Sydney.
The question in the chat, it says, are there examples of successful applications on the website itself?
Example of successful applications. We don't share the actual applications. We do share all of the successfully awarded projects. Those are all on our, if you do look on the ptnyfriends.org/grants, there is a link there that says all of the past successfully awarded projects on there. But yeah, in terms of applications, no, we don't have any, we don't share any of those, fortunately. Again, that's all part of being friends groups and partnering. That's you're always welcome to reach out to some and see what they'd be willing to share. That's what makes a wonderful network of organizations. I see Pauline Burns, I might have identified an error in my timeline here. She's asking, the interim report is due January 2025. Isn't that when the grant award is announced? Let me just back up because again, this was a new, back up here. Yes, okay, yep, that is. Nope, interim report due is January 2026. This is the 2-year timeline. So the applications, yep, are coming up due August 28th. The awards announced. Your first check will be received January 2025. Yes, 25. And then so unlike for those of you who have applied for some of the other categories, the interim report typically come because those are 1-year grants. Those interim reports come 6 months later. These being 2-year grants, this interim report is actually 1 year later. So your interim report for this professional development grant will not be due until January 2026. And that is when your second half of the award will be dispersed to you. Anything else?
Yes, there was a slight adjustment to one of the original questions from Jacqueline. For the question that had said about the organizational plan document on the website, she had meant to say the
Oh, a
strategic plan.
strategic plan. Okay. Yeah. No, yeah, unfortunately, no, we don't have a strategic plan sample, but what you might be, I don't know if you are a member of NICON, the New York Council of Nonprofits. They likely could have, first of all, if you are a member, I'm sure they'll be able to fix you up with a consultant to be able to provide you with something, but they may have those in their resources. So I would reach out to them to see what they might have. Okay, I will put up one last time here, just the contact information. Again, I had mentioned earlier that I am very happy to lend an ear to your proposal before you start filling out the LOI, and just to see if it will fly or won't. I'm a very honest guy when it comes to letting you know if something doesn't sound too strong. I will, last thing I want is for you to waste your valuable time with submitting something that we would have just denied right off the bat there. Or, for example, if you are, most importantly though, as Sydney has gone over, is to really make 100% sure your organization is eligible. We do have those who spend just dozens of hours filling these out, and then it turns out that they're not even eligible for it. So make sure your agreement is, you do have that official agreement with the state agency, and that your nonprofit materials are all up to date. And yeah, again, if you are thinking of a position and want to run it by me, just give that number a call there, and I'll be happy to set up a time with you. So with that said, thank you all very much. We will be emailing you the recording of this, as well as the Q&As there and our answers to them. And so feel free to share away with any of your colleagues. And if you are also considering the Other categories, those ones are coming up. Again, I don't have them, but in front of me, the dates, but you can go to the ptnyfriends.org/grants and make sure you register for the proper date and time for those. But wonderful. Thank you so very much, everybody. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. We're done 8 minutes early, so make good use of those 8 minutes. Have a wonderful day, everyone.